everybody, this is Dan O'Connor coming to you live from beautiful downtown White Rock, New Mexico. And I'm going to start off this week talking about our visual and vocal tactics. This week we've got a great lineup. We're going to be talking about some visual and vocal tactics. We'll of course be talking about some danger phrases and power phrases. Of course, we'll be doing a couple of difficult people strategies and our principle of the week. We've got a lot of great things to talk about. And as I mentioned, we're going to start out talking about our visual and vocal strategies for the week. And the first visual strategy that I'd like to discuss with you is to sidle up to men. When you sidle up to a man, what that means is really about how you position yourself. It tends to be that if we are men, which I am, men, we tend to communicate like this. Men, when we talk to other men, tend to have our heads tilted to the side. You ever notice that? So when I naturally communicate with another man, I tend to be not facing him head on, but instead we tend to be kind of shoulder to shoulder while we communicate. And women tend to communicate head on, shoulders to shoulders. So the challenge comes in when we communicate between the sexes. So if a man communicates with a woman, what we tend to do is we will naturally kind of turn to the side as we start to talk to her, and women tend to do this little dance around us, like, why won't you just face me while you talk to me? And a woman tends to approach a man head on. And what that triggers in a man is a sign of aggression. You know, it tends to be, if you have dogs, that when dogs approach one another face to face, that tends to be an aggressive situation. When dogs are being friendly and kind of sniffing each other out, they go side by side and they go around each other. You know what I mean? And men, we have that same communication pattern built into us, where when we are being aggressive with one another, we will face each other head on as we disagree or as we argue a point. And once we're done arguing, we'll turn back to the side again. So if a woman approaches us face to face, that triggers that natural instinct of, oh, this is a aggressive situation. And you'll notice that when you face a man and start speaking face on, shoulders to shoulders, our arms tend to go up like this as we speak. And as we communicate from the side, our arms will shift and change and kind of get off of our chest because we don't feel the need to protect ourselves. So women, remember, when you're communicating with a man, sidle up. If you're a woman and you have men in your life, chances are you've noticed that one of the best times to communicate with the man in your life is as you drive down the street. You ever notice that? A lot of women will tell me, they'll say, oh, some of the best conversations I've had with my husband are as we drive down the street. And one of the reasons is because of the way you are positioned. Men tend to just naturally open up when we're sitting next to somebody and don't have to look at you face to face. It's just something that's built into us. So if you're a woman, remember that, and to open up the lines of communication in a man, position yourself accordingly, sidle up. If you are a man, remember that to open up the lines of communication more effectively in most women, approach them and communicate head on, shoulders to shoulders. And that simple strategy of positioning yourself more consciously when communicating with the opposite sex will help open up the lines of communication and make you a more savvy, powerful, productive communicator. Simple. Now I'd like to talk about the verbal component of a message when we send it. Remember, in one of our previous lessons, we discussed how there are three components to every message that we send. There is a verbal component, the words. There is a vocal component, the tone, and there is a visual component, basically everything else. We just discussed the visual component, how when you're communicating between the sexes, positioning yourself carefully really can add to or take away from your message. And do you remember what percentage of the message is vocal, the tone in our voice? Remember that approximately 38% of the message that we send in person is the tone in our voice. Many of us struggle with getting others to find us credible or powerful or confident, and for many of us, a big reason that other people don't take us as seriously as they could is the tone in our voice. If you, for example, watch Oprah Winfrey, and you watch the first episode of The Oprah Show, and then you watch the last episode of The Oprah Show, you will notice that she lowered her voice more than an octave, about an octave and a half. And the reason she did that is because in general, for most women, lowering your voice is going to help you find what's called your power tone and project more of an image of power and confidence and professionalism. For example, Katie Couric. You'll notice when she started doing the nightly news, she started off actually in the morning doing some type of morning show, and when she did her morning show and when she did her evening show, you'll notice that when she made that transition, her evening show required her to convey more power and substance. So she dropped her voice more than an octave in one day when she went from the morning to the evening, because she knew that the evening audience wanted her to be more credible and serious and powerful. So many times a woman drops her voice almost an octave to find her power tone. Not all the time. Sometimes women have to actually raise their voice, and a lot of men have to raise their voice to find their power tone. I'm going to give you a simple, quick, effective trick to help you find your power tone right now. And what I'd like you to do is pretend that I just said something to you really profound, and you really agree with it, and I'd like you to do this. Say, mm-hmm. Okay, do that. Mm-hmm. Do it again. Mm-hmm. One more time. Mm-hmm. What I'd like you to do is notice that particular vibration. Put your fingers on this part of your throat and say, mm-hmm. 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 Now what I'd like you to do until our next lesson is, when you have time, as you're going around the house, doing your day-to-day activities, practice finding that vibration. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because what you want to do is find that vibration and start with it when you're delivering a message, and you need to be seen as powerful and confident and savvy and all of that good stuff. Because when you do this, when you say, mm-hmm, that vibration at the end is the range where you will find your power tone. Now don't worry if that range, when you say mm-hmm, is very different from your regular speaking voice. If you're going to give, let's say, a presentation, or have a job interview, or a meeting with a prospective client, or when you're about to find yourself in a situation, maybe doing some public speaking, and you think, boy, I need to use every trick in the book to help boost my confidence and project a powerful image, you only need to use your power tone for the first 30 seconds of your message. Because remember, when we first hear somebody speak, our brain subconsciously forms an impression of that person. We create our first impression pretty rapidly. And by the time 30 seconds has passed, whoever's listening to you will have judged you and will have formed their impression of you. So you only really have to worry about using your power tone. Like, for example, right now, I am speaking to you in what would be considered my power tone, because when I say, mm-hmm, it's that vibration that I'll end with. And I only have to worry about speaking in this tone for 30 seconds, then you've formed your opinion and I can go ahead and speak however I choose. Isn't that great? So remember, the next time you're about to give a presentation, make an important phone call, meet somebody new, give a speech, and you think, I'm going to use every strategy I can to appear powerful and confident. Before you begin speaking, take a moment to go off in private. Chances are you don't want to hook up a mic and start going, with an audience listening to you. But take a moment before you give that presentation to find your power tone. Because remember, that is going to convey or take away from your personal power more than the words that you're about to speak. Simple. That is how you find your power tone. All right, now I'd like to get to our danger phrases and power phrases for the week. If you know me, you know how much I love danger phrases and power phrases, because they're quick, easy ways to take immediate steps towards your communication goal by just changing around a word here and there. And the first danger phrases I'd like to talk to you about are for home. And danger phrase number 1 is, you said. Remember, the next time at home when you're about to use the phrase, you said, the phrase you said tends to speed up our self-talk, because remember, last week we talked about how many words per minute the average person speaks to himself or herself. And the average person's self-talk is running at about 850 words per minute. And using a phrase such as, well, you just said, or you said, yada, 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 only speeds up that self-talk. Especially because we want to remember that the average person, more than half the time, we think we're saying one thing and we're actually saying another. So if you said to the average person, did you just say yada, 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 and you repeated back to that person word for word what they just said, over half the time, they're going to either think or say, no, that's not what I just said, even though it was. And that's just something we all want to keep in mind because it's something we all do. We might think we're saying one thing, but we're actually saying another. So instead of causing more confrontation or speeding up self-talk, because even if somebody doesn't say to you, that's not what I said, they're probably going to think it is not what I said, but whatever, go on. To eliminate that self-talk, instead, use the power phrase, I heard. Sounds simple, right? So instead of saying to somebody, wait a minute, did you just say XYZ? Try using phrases such as, let me clarify what I heard before I respond, all right? So remember, let me clarify what I heard before I respond is going to get you where you want to go more often and more effectively than, all right, let me just get this straight. You just said, so remember, danger phrase, you said. Power phrase, I heard. Talk about what you heard rather than what they said, and you'll be much more successful in reaching your communication goal. And the next danger phrase I have for home is, don't take this the wrong way, but, or, no offense, but, We've all heard people say that to us. And we know, speaking of self-talk, we know the moment somebody says to us, hey, don't take this the wrong way, or, yeah, no offense, but we know that they're about to say something offensive, and the way we're about to take it is exactly the way they intended it, offensively. So instead of making that mistake, really when we say to somebody, hey, no offense, but, or don't take this the wrong way, but, what we're really doing is we're saying something that we acknowledge, that we know is offensive. And we're going to say it anyway, and we're just going to try and kind of give ourselves permission to say that offensive thing by prefacing it with a phrase such as, don't take this the wrong way, but, or no offense, but, when that does nothing to diminish the rudeness or the offensiveness of the phrase that follows those statements. So, you know how sometimes there are not power phrases that we use to substitute a danger phrase? We don't always have pairs. These phrases, no offense, but, or don't take this the wrong way, are what we call purge phrases. These are what we call delete phrases. There's no phrase that you would use to substitute a phrase like, don't take this the wrong way, but, or no offense, but. Instead, what I'd like you to do the next time you're about to say one of those phrases is stop, do your cost-benefit analysis, and ask yourself, what would the benefit be for me saying what I'm thinking of saying? What would the price be? Because chances are the real price of saying something that comes after one of those phrases is you're about to hurt the person's feelings to whom you're speaking. That's generally what's going to happen, is you're going to hurt them. I mean, you can call it many things, but chances are what you're about to say is going to hurt. And I'd like you to ask yourself, is it worth paying that price to get whatever it is that you're trying to get? You know, generally, we are communicating on an unconscious level. We're not consciously communicating. We're speaking our mind, so to speak. And we all know people who use phrases such as, well, I just tell it like a T.I. is. I just speak my mind. I can't help it. I say what I think. And remember, in one of our previous lessons, I can't help it is a danger phrase. To say I can't help but say what I think is a pure fallacy. We can all help what we say. And we can all choose while we do our cost-benefit analysis. We can choose to be kind, or we can choose to be right. We can choose to be right, or we can choose to be effective. And many times we're not consciously communicating. The next time you're about to say something such as no offense, but, or don't take this the wrong way, but, stop and use that as an opportunity to more consciously communicate. Do your cost-benefit analysis. What would I get out of saying what I'm about to say? What price would I have to pay, or would that person have to pay, and is it worth it? And then proceed with caution. And if you're going to say something that you know to be offensive, just say it. Don't preface it with something like, don't take this the wrong way, but, or no offense, but. Just rip that Band-Aid off and say it, and then pay the price. The next two danger phrases I'm going to give you are for work. And danger phrase number one is a better idea, or a better solution. Later on, we're going to be talking about how it's more powerful, instead of saying I have an idea, to say I have a solution or I have a proposal. But with that said, the next time at work, when you're about to say to somebody, hey, I have a better idea, or I have a better solution, think about why your idea or your solution or your proposal is better and state that. So for example, instead of saying, oh, I have a better solution, Listen to how much more powerful it is when you would instead say something such as, well, I have a more time-saving solution, or I have a more cost-effective solution, or I have a more employee-focused solution. There you go. So instead of simply stating, I have a better idea, or I have a better solution, determine why is your idea or your solution better, and state that instead of the word better. And people will receive your message with more open arms because instead of simply stating it to be better, you're stating why you think it's better. And the next danger phrase I have for work is, I disagree. You know, we've all heard people say to us, well, I understand what you're saying, I just disagree. And those are fighting words, you know what I mean? Or we'll have people say to us things like this, because they learned this in a communication conference. I respectfully disagree. And there's nothing respectful about that. I mean, you either agree or you don't. And we've all heard somebody say things like this. Well, let's just agree to disagree. Really? Those are fighting words, right? Am I right? Those are fighting words. There is a biochemical reaction that is caused by using words such as, I disagree with you. You know, basically every word that we hear has a biochemical effect on us. If we were hooked up to those brain machines, like lie detector machines, you can see on the screen when people hear emotionally charged language, such as if you were just right now to hear phrases that include words such as molest, kill, murder. I apologize for saying those things because right now, if you had been hooked up to a lie detector machine, you would have actually seen movement because words and phrases have a biochemical effect on other people. I want to keep that in mind. And a simple phrase such as, I disagree with you, has a negative biochemical effect on the recipient. So instead, if you choose a savvier phrase, such as, well, I can understand why you'd see it that way, I simply see it differently, but go on, tell me more, this is interesting. Ha! And you use the phrase, I see it differently, or I see it another way, you're going to avoid creating that negative biochemical reaction in the person to whom you're speaking. And even on a more conscious level, those are not fighting words. Those are not confrontational words. Those are simply saying, your opinion is valid, I understand your perspective, I simply have a different perspective. And talking about your perspective or the way you see it, rather than using the phrase, I disagree, will make you a more powerful communicator because you're using more powerful phrases. Simple. And now let's get on to our dealing with difficult people tactics for the week. The first tactic I'd like to talk with you about is the surrender tactic. You know, I had a woman once in one of my conferences who came up to me and she said, you know, at work, they told me that I was too aggressive and too negative because when somebody brought up a solution or an idea, I would express my opinion if I didn't agree with it. By person, I'm talking about my boss. And so I decided, okay, the next time I don't agree, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. And so my boss told me about one of her ideas, and she said, here it is, yada, yada, yada. And I didn't say anything because I figured I don't want to get in trouble for being negative or stating my opinion. And so that time I got written up because I was told my silence was aggressive. What am I supposed to do about that? And I thought, you know, she was not alone. Many of us have found ourselves in that particular conundrum where we're thinking, okay, I don't agree with what that person is saying. The path that they're choosing to take is not a path that I want to go down. However, I don't want to seem negative. I just want to state my opinion, for example, for the record. But we also want to be seen at work, of course, as somebody who's fair and flexible. Because if we are seen as fair and flexible, people will be more fair and flexible with us. So what I'd like you to do is find situations where people are proposing some solution or some path that they want to go down. And if it's something that really isn't going to affect your career development, if it's something that's not the biggest deal to you, you can kind of take it or leave it whether they implement their plan or whether they do what you want to do. Find areas that you can surrender, or in areas in which you can surrender and do it. And to surrender, there's a 3-step process that I'd like you to follow. Step number 1, state what your objection is. And a very savvy way to state what your objection is to simply use the phrase, it's difficult for me to see how that will work. So say that out loud. It's difficult for me to see how that will work. Say it again. It's difficult for me to see how that will work. One more time and it's yours. It's difficult for me to see how that will work. That is how we state our objection. Now, I'd like you to, step number 2, convey trust. So step number 1 was to state your objection. Step number 2 is to convey trust. And a very simple way to convey trust is to say to somebody, however, I trust your judgment. So say that. I trust your judgment. Say that again. I trust your judgment. One last time and it's yours. I trust your judgment. And step number 3 in the surrender process is show your support. And now to show your support and to say I trust your judgment does not mean that, you are the master, I am totally in awe, and I agree with everything you're saying. It's simply giving somebody the professional discretion that they deserve and that you deserve. Sometimes you agree with some people, sometimes you don't. But when you find areas in which you can surrender, and even though you don't necessarily see it the same way, you're going to let them have the professional freedom that you both deserve, support them. And a very simple way to show support for other people is to say, you have my support. Simple. So to put it all together, the 3 steps of surrendering are to say to somebody, it's difficult for me to see how that will work. However, I trust your judgment and you have my support. Ha! Now that you've done that, you have gone on record stating the fact that, hey, this is not the way that I would choose to go, just so y'all know, but you're not doing it in a way that's belittling, or that's confrontational, or that's negative. You're simply stating, hey, it's difficult for me to see how that'll work, but I'm open, and I trust your judgment, and you have my support. Simple. And the more fair and flexible you are, remember, with other people, the more fair and flexible you will be perceived, and the more fair and flexible others will be with you. So actually, actively look for situations in which you can surrender and do it. Now you know how. And now I'd like to talk about saying no. Many of you struggle with saying no. I struggle with saying no because I'm more passive by nature. I'm not a really aggressive communicator by nature. And when I deal with somebody who won't take no for an answer, or somebody who's pushy, it can be difficult to say no and hold our ground. And many of us get pushed over by more aggressive personality types who don't want to take no for an answer. And the reason we get pushed over is because we don't have a plan. So what I'm going to do right now is give you the plan for the next time you need to say no. Now we'll be covering different ways to say no. There's a 2-step process, which I'm going to cover now. There's a 3-step process. There's a 4-step process. And it really all depends on who you're saying no to. This type of no is for somebody whose opinion at this moment you're not really valuing. This is not for maybe my boss who I'm looking for, or who I'm looking to for career advancement. It's not to use with a client who's made a request of me and I need to decline that request because I simply cannot fulfill it. This is to be used with somebody in the office, like maybe a beggar, somebody who's always asking you for money or asking you for time, and you simply don't want to give it, and you don't want to give a long, drawn-out explanation. So are you ready? This is your plan now. For those of you who have trouble saying no, get ready. Here it is. Step number 1, you use the phrase, I can't. So you can also say, if you'd like to, unfortunately I can't. So no matter what they're asking you for, hey Dan, can you donate $50 to the cause? Hey Dan, can you stay after work for a couple hours? Hey Dan, can you help clean up after the party on Friday night? You can almost always start using the phrase, you know what, unfortunately I can't. And when you say to somebody I can't, what is the number 1 response that you're going to get? Why not? That's what most people say, right? Why? How come? Why not? And to that, you're going to simply respond, because I cannot, or because I can't. So remember, the word because is a magic word. They do these studies where they'll have people, for example, try to budge in line at the movies, and they'll budge in line 100 times, or they'll try to budge in line 100 times, and they'll say to the people at the front of the line, hey, can I cut in front of you? My girlfriend's waiting in the car. And people will, the vast majority will say no. And they'll have that same person go up to another 100 people and say to them, hey, can I cut in front of you because my girlfriend's waiting in the car? The only thing they'll do is change the message by inserting the word because in the middle. And 3 times more people will say, yes, you can budge in front of me when you use the word because. People are more likely to accept your ideas when you simply throw in the word because. And so if I say to you, after saying to you, I can't, and you say, well, why not? And I say to you, because I just can't, or because I simply can't. Watch how many people will do this. They'll say, oh, I understand. Like you just gave them an answer. And if they don't, remember to use the broken record. That's step number 3. So step number 1 is to say, I can't, or unfortunately, I cannot, or unfortunately, the answer has to be no. And when they say, why not? Say, because I can't, or because the answer has to be no. And when they push it and start trying to knock you off your game, or to get you to say different words, remember, use the broken record. Don't start giving explanations, or they'll know they have you on the run. Instead, simply hold your ground and think, what did I just say a moment ago? Oh, I simply can't. So if I'm talking to John, for example, and John says, hey, Dan, you want to go out for drinks after work? And I say, oh, I can't. John might say, well, how come? And I'll say, because I just can't. Well, what are you doing? I just can't. Can you come for just a few minutes? I can't. Well, what's more important than coming out with the gang? I can't. Keep repeating yourself. Remember, when people hear you say the same words over and over and over again, that's not rude on your part for repeating yourself. It's rude for somebody to keep pushing you after you've already said, no, I don't want to do that. No, I cannot. So don't worry about being rude. The person will recognize you as one of those. You know, if you say to somebody, I just can't, 3 times in a row, the 3rd time that you say it, that person might think or even say, yeah, I just can't. And that's fine, because remember, you're not saying no for them. You're saying no for you. And using the broken record makes it more effective. It makes it easier, and you will notice how people will start respecting your no a lot sooner in the game because they'll recognize you as somebody who's not a pushover and whose no actually means no. And you'll be perceived as that person because you had a simple process, a simple 3-step process. Number 1, say no. Say I can't. Say unfortunately I can't. Number 2, use the word because, and then repeat yourself, because I just can't, because unfortunately I can't. And step number 3, use the broken record until they go away. Very simple and very effective. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is our principle for the week. And this week, remember, what I'd like you to do before we go ahead and talk about this principle is complete step 3 of your personal compass. There's a worksheet included with your materials, and the worksheet is for making step 3 of your personal compass. Step 3 is you're going to write down what you want. You know, for example, I want peace, love. I want financial independence. That's a good one. I want freedom. I want joy and happiness. I want to make a difference in the world. What do you want? Remember that in an airplane, for example, airplanes are off course 99% of the time. They are. But they eventually get to where they're going because they are constantly adjusting in midair because they know where they eventually want to go. So even though they're off course most of the time, they eventually get to their destination because they keep adjusting, and they keep adjusting because they know what the eventual destination is. Many of us have not taken the time to really honor ourselves and honor our families by deciding, what is it that we want? You know, what is it that you're going to work for every day? What is it that you wake up for and work hard for every day? What is it that you're using this communication program for? What is it that you want? I'm going to ask you to go through that worksheet and write it down. Write down a few things that you want. What are some, you can call them goals, you can call them objectives, but write some of them down. Because this week's principle of the week is decide what you want and be okay with being off track. You know, be okay with having to readjust a lot. Be okay with forgiving yourself and saying, boy, that did not work out what I just wanted to say, and trying something a little bit different the next time. But we will never get to our final destination if we have not yet determined what it is, right? And you know, it used to be that people who wrote down where they were going or wrote down their goals, wrote down their objectives and focused on those people were called witches. And those things that they wrote down were called spells because they magically came to pass simply because they wrote them down. There really is power in writing down what our goals are, even if it's just one time. The universe will conspire in your favor to help make that come to pass, but we have to do our part as well. And we have to recognize that each word that we speak and each thought that we think is either bringing us towards our goal or what we want, or taking us away from it. So taking a moment to write down what it is that you want will help you eventually get there. And remember, it is okay to be off track 99% of the time, because when we choose incorrectly, when we make a communication mistake, guaranteed we will have the opportunity to repeat that situation, because until we get it right, until we work through whatever it is inside of us that we need to work through so that we can achieve our success, whatever that means to you, those situations will keep coming up again and again and again and again, maybe in different people, maybe in the same people, but you know how that goes. When we choose incorrectly in one of our relationships, whatever that issue was where we chose incorrectly is going to manifest again, whether it's in that relationship or another relationship. And we will be given the opportunity to choose again. But it's difficult to know which path to choose when we've never written down where it is that we're going at the end of the day. So remember, it's okay to be off track most of the time. But what I'd like you to do right now is to take out your worksheet on step 3 in creating a personal compass and jot down some things that you want, and remember to be okay with being off track most of the time.